The Batman is a movie that I was really anticipating. It's been getting a lot of hype because, simply put, it looks really good. It looked like a darker, grittier version of the character whose DCEU representation hadn't been particularly well liked, and that's exactly what it was. The Batman follows a much more grounded, story-driven plot, which has a very noir detective feel to it. While a lot of the focus is on Batman the Greatest Detective, it doesn't shy away from action either. There's a healthy dose between Batman the intelligent, observant detective and Batman the kick-ass vigilante. So Batman's investigative skills really come into play as he's going through the Riddler's game. It really doesn't feel like other superhero films. It's very serious in tone, very focused, and for the most part, even though it's setting up Robert Pattinson's Batman and other characters in the universe, it doesn't feel like a huge grand spectacle with lots of cameos and references. I like how it was just a self-contained Batman story. It made it feel a lot more purposeful. I think the action is very well done. There's not too much of it, but where there is, it's well choreographed. One of the complaints about the Nolan trilogy was that Batman felt slow and sluggish in his fighting style. While this movie's version of The Dark Knight is quick and brutal, his fighting style isn't exactly the most polished, but it reflects how he's still pretty new to this job. Nonetheless, the combat is really exhilarating, and especially when you're in a big cinema with massive bass, each punch is brutally staggering. I think they really should have gone in with the brutality though, and bumped the rating up to an R. This doesn't really seem like a movie young kids and teenagers would be interested in anyway. In fact, I'd say this movie would probably be a lot more appealing to certain people than the mass population. Unlike Joker, which was also very realistic, I feel like Gotham in this movie still has some of that comic flair, with places like Central Garden in Gotham, despite this movie very much being grounded in reality, and a lot of Gotham's personality has to do with the filming. My favourite aspect of the movie was probably the camera work. Matt Reeves and cinematographer Greg Fraser clearly really care about making every shot as engaging as possible, and if you've seen his other movies like Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, you'd agree. Even when it's just dialogue or a character walking, the camera's always finding a new perspective, and that makes every scene engrossing. There's a lot of POV shots which could get exhausting by the end, but even then, it only really makes the shots more varied, and a lot of that engagement comes from the lighting. This Gotham has a very dingy noir feel to it. There's rain in nearly every scene, it's always dark. The only splashes of colour we really get are reds and oranges that really make the scene pop. This red motif is everywhere in The Batman, and it's very prominent in the marketing. I thought it would be overpowering, but it really gives the scenes where it's used a burst of life and passion. It really conveys the raw emotion that red is associated with, whether it's giving a street scene a violent highlight, or painting the Gotham sky behind Batman, or highlighting the foreboding nature of the Dark Knight as he approaches. It just really works to fuel the impactfulness of every scene. There's quite a bit of strobe, especially in one of the coolest scenes in the entire movie, where Batman's walking through a corridor beating guys left and right, and the action is only highlighted by gunshots. Even shots of literally just Batman's boots splashing in the rain, of which there are actually several, look really badass. The Batsuit is also really well done. It's kind of hard to translate a costume that looks like a big black bat into a realistic film. They could have very easily just made a black military suit and called it a day. However, in the movie it's still clearly a batsuit, but that armoured look with the razor bat symbol makes it look like it would actually protect him. It wasn't afraid to show off how much detail they put into it. I mean, sure, the cowl looks sort of goofy, but to be fair, when has it really not? They also incorporated a lot of his bat gadgets in, like his grappling gun, and even a prototype version of his glider. The Batmobile was of course in this movie too, but it was kind of just a regular car, and yeah, you'd think that would be pretty unstylistic, but the way they introduced it was just chef's kiss. Robert Pattinson was pretty brilliant in this movie. I will admit, when he was first revealed to be the new Batman, I was in that group of people who were kind of like, is this a good decision? Yes it was. I would honestly say Pattinson's Batman might actually be my favourite movie rendition of the character yet. His acting is just so on point. He manages to have that sort of brooding seriousness to himself, but when that explosion of emotion is needed, he delivers. Batman has a really prominent presence in the movie, which is good considering, well, the title, and he's in his costume for about 90% of it, and even though he's wearing a cowl and black eye makeup, it's amazing how much feeling he can convey with just his eyes. They purposely stand out against the black mask because they want to bring your attention to them. They're your connection to Batman as a man. There's another thing this film does really well. Though it could be a bit more subtle, the Batman shows a very obvious arc to this character from beginning to end. In this thrilling opening sequence, it shows Batman as the former part of his name, a thing in the shadows. It shows criminals terrified of the dark because of the symbol that Batman is. But by the end, Batman realizes vengeance isn't what the city needs. He starts as an angry, broken vigilante, and becomes a hero. After realizing how corrupt the system is, and how beating people in the night wasn't helping it, he steps up. He becomes a symbol of hope rather than fear. People used to call him Vengeance, but now he grows past that name and becomes Batman. I think the other characters are pretty good too. Paul Dano as the Riddler was pretty interesting. Though he was cold and calculated, he also had that sort of unhinged nature to him, which made him feel like a real threat. But it's a lot more like outbursts that reveal his unstable psyche. I like that his riddles really do pose a challenge to Batman and the police, and how this kind of unravels the corruption behind Gotham, which has been one of its key themes since the start of Batman. However, I find it kind of weird that his whole plan is exposing the rich and corrupt, and kind of being a voice to the poor people, and his final plan is to flood Gotham, which will definitely affect a lot more of the innocent people that he's trying to defend. Maybe I'm just being stupid, but it seems kind of dumb to have this mysterious serial killer that's plotting everything from behind the scenes, only to willingly get himself captured and blow some stuff up to cause a lot of damage to a lot of people. I mean, I guess it gave Batman a chance to prove himself to the population, but I sort of wish this entire last act wasn't so drawn out. Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman was good. I don't have much to say about her. I think she represented the character faithfully. Though I liked her relationship with Batman, their romance felt a bit rushed, but it's not a big deal. It's very hard to live up to Gary Oldman's Commissioner Gordon, but Jeffrey Wright does a good job. I like Andy Serkis a lot, and I wish they showed more of his relationship as Alfred with Bruce Wayne, since that becomes a pretty big plot point later on. I also enjoy the score of the movie. It's kind of become a staple that Batman themes are really good, and this one isn't an exception. It's a lot slower and more foreboding, reflecting the tone of the movie, and they play it enough that it feels very prominent, but that also gets kind of tiring because they use it a lot, and music in general. I feel like some scenes could have used a bit more silence. The only real issue I have with the Batman is that it kind of dragged on. Near the end of the second act, it began feeling a bit slow, like they just kept going from place to place, and the red herrings just kept piling on. It did pick up eventually, but you do have to kind of get through about 20 minutes of static movie. While the conclusion was satisfying, the ending kept baiting you into thinking it was done, and then just go on to another ending. The movie is already 3 hours long, and with so many end scenes, it feels sluggish. I think it would have been fine to end the movie with them catching Riddler in the cafe and then Gotham flooding. I think all of his Riddler minions were a bit unnecessary. I'm not sure how this group of 50 people managed to coordinate on a public 4chan forum without being tracked by the police. This kind of societal revolution idea worked a bit better in Joker, because that was all about chaos rather than a really detailed plan. Then you also had a really satisfying final scene where Batman contrasts his narration in the beginning. It's bright outside, and he's recognized as a hero rather than a scary vigilante in the shadows. He helps an injured woman, showing his compassion for helping the people rather than getting revenge on criminals. It's the perfect character arc ending. But then it just cuts to another scene of Riddler in Arkham Asylum, and then another scene of Batman and Catwoman saying their goodbyes, and then another scene of them riding their bikes. I don't know, they just cut some of the stuff of this movie. I would have liked it even more. But regardless of the length and the small amount of fluff, this is a movie I would definitely find myself rewatching. It's exactly the splash of fresh superhero storytelling that we need in an era full of loud, bright, noisy blockbusters, and I'm a fan of the more condensed detective thriller style of plot. I really like the Batman, and I'd give it a 9 out of 10, all things considered. There's also this not so subtle teaser of Joker at the end, which I have some conflicting opinions on. A Joker in this universe would probably be really interesting, but then again, it's the Joker. We've seen him so many times, you know. If they had to include him, I guess they would save him for the final movie of the trilogy, as this final boss that would test everything Batman had learned. Considering how well this movie's doing, I don't think they need Joker's inclusion to hype up the sequel. Maybe someone like a darker villain like Hush, who was teased in the movie actually, could be pretty good. So yeah, there's my review. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. See ya.